Chapter 1. The Hand's Gambit. What if the Red Wedding killed Tywin Lannister instead of Robb Stark? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The great solar of Casterly Rock has never felt smaller to Tywin Lannister as he stares at the raven's message in his weathered hands. The parchment bears the seal of House Frey, and its contents confirm what he has spent months planning. Tomorrow night, the Red Wedding will proceed as arranged. Robb Stark will die at the Twins, along with his mother and his army. The rebellion in the north will end, not with the clash of steel, but with the betrayal of bread and salt. Tywin sets the letter aside and walks to the window that overlooks the western sea. The sun is setting, casting long shadows across the courtyard below. For 3 years, this war has consumed the realm. 3 years of his gold, his soldiers, his time. 3 years of watching lesser men make a mockery of proper order. But tomorrow, it ends. The young wolf will be put down like the beast he is, and the 7 kingdoms will remember why lions are not trifled with. A knock interrupts his thoughts. Sir Kevan Lannister enters without waiting for permission, his face bearing the same stern expression he has worn since childhood. "The preparations are complete, my lord," Kevan says. "The Freys understand their role. Bolton has positioned his men accordingly. All that remains is to wait for word of Stark's death." Tywin turns from the window. His brother has served faithfully for decades, but Kevan lacks vision. He sees only the immediate task, not the broader implications. "Tell me, brother," Tywin says slowly. "How many times have the Freys disappointed us? How many times has their reliability proven inconsistent?" Kevan's brow furrows. "They have cause enough for revenge, my lord. Robb Stark made them look like fools when he broke his betrothal. Walder Frey's pride demands satisfaction." "Pride?" Tywin repeats the word like it tastes sour. "Pride makes men reckless. Pride makes them overconfident. Pride makes them believe they can act without consequence." The hand of the king moves to his desk, where maps of the Riverlands spread across the polished wood. Red markers indicate Stark positions, blue ones mark Frey holdings, and gold shows Lannister forces. Everything appears perfectly arranged, yet Tywin's mind churns with possibilities for failure. "Walder Frey is 90 years old," Tywin continues. His mind wanders. His sons hate each other more than they hate the Starks. Bolton serves his own interests above all others. He places a finger on the Twins, that crucial crossing that has decided the fate of kingdoms before. Too many variables. Too much left to chance. Kevan shifts uncomfortably. "What are you suggesting, my lord?" Tywin's green eyes fix on his brother with the intensity that has made lesser men confess their sins unbidden. For a moment, the only sound is the crackling of logs in the fireplace. "I am suggesting that matters of such importance require personal attention," Tywin says finally. "I am suggesting that the architect of victory should witness its completion." The words hang in the air between them. Kevan's face pales as he grasps their meaning. "You cannot be serious," Kevan says. "Ride to the Twins? Place yourself in the midst of a massacre? My lord, the risk of failure outweighs the risk of presence." Tywin's voice cuts through his brother's protests like a blade through silk. "How many times have our allies disappointed us because they believed we were too distant to hold them accountable? How many times have careful plans crumbled because the men executing them knew they would face no immediate consequences for failure?" Kevan steps forward, his voice urgent. "The Freys and Boltons are bound by gold and fear. They dare not betray us. Fear fades when the one inspiring it is hundreds of miles away." Tywin moves around the desk, his footsteps echoing in the stone chamber. But when Tywin Lannister stands before them, when they must look into these eyes as they commit the act, when they know that any hesitation or treachery will be met with immediate and absolute retribution. He pauses, letting the implications settle. Then they remember why the lions rule and the sheep obey. The solar falls silent, except for the distant sound of waves against the rocks below. Kevin's mind races through a dozen protests, a dozen practical concerns, but he knows his brother's expression. The decision has been made. Nothing will change it now. If you are determined to do this, Kevin says finally, at least take a proper escort. 100 men. 200. Tywin shakes his head. Too many men would arouse suspicion. Too few would appear weak. He returns to the maps, studying the routes between Casterly Rock and the Twins. 50 men will suffice. Knights and men-at-arms who understand the value of discretion. We ride as a diplomatic party. Nothing more. And if something goes wrong, if the Starks discover the plot before it unfolds, a thin smile crosses Tywin's lips. Then Robb Stark dies, knowing that the hand of the king came personally to watch him fall. There is value in that, a lesson for history. He rolls up the largest map with careful precision. Besides, what can go wrong? The boy walks willingly into a trap of our making. He places himself at the mercy of men who have already chosen their loyalties. He surrounds himself with enemies and calls them friends. The irony of his words will not become apparent until tomorrow night. Kevin recognizes defeat. Very well, I will make the arrangements, but I ride with you. Naturally. Tywin moves toward his armor stand, where his golden plate gleams in the firelight. Tomorrow he will wear it proudly as he watches the culmination of years of planning. Send word to our allies. The hand of the king will attend the wedding of Edmure Tully. Tell them to prepare accordingly. As Kevin departs to carry out his orders, Tywin remains alone with his thoughts and his certainty. In his mind, he can already see it. Walder Frey's great hall echoing with the screams of dying Northmen, Robb Stark's blood pooling on the floor, Catelyn Stark's final moments of despair as she watches her son's crown slip from his lifeless head. The sight will be sweeter for being witnessed firsthand. He has always believed that power is most effective when applied personally, directly, without intermediaries to dilute its impact. Tomorrow night, he will prove that principle correct one final time. The hand of the king retires to his chambers, unaware that he has just condemned himself to the very fate he has planned for his enemies. In seeking to ensure victory through his presence, he has guaranteed his own destruction. But such is the nature of hubris. It blinds even the cleverest men to the consequences of their own actions. Dawn will bring the journey to the Twins. Dawn will bring the beginning of the end, though not in the way Tywin Lannister expects. Chapter 2. Wolves and Lions at the Crossroads. The afternoon sun casts long shadows across the twin towers of House Frey as a column of riders approaches from the south. Their banners hang limp in the still air, but the crimson and gold of House Lannister gleams unmistakably in the light. 50 mounted men escort a figure whose mere presence has the power to reshape kingdoms. Tywin Lannister has come to witness the end of the rebellion in the north. From the battlements of the Water Tower, Robb Stark watches the approaching column with growing unease. The young wolf stands tall despite the weight of his crown, his auburn hair catching the light as he turns to the Frey soldier beside him. "Those are Lannister banners," Robb says, his voice steady but his eyes troubled. Why would Lannister forces approach the Twins now? Today of all days? The Frey man-at-arms, a nervous youth with the weak chin, common to his house, shifts uncomfortably. Lord Walder mentioned expecting distinguished guests, Your Grace. Perhaps they come to discuss terms. Rob's jaw tightens. Terms. As if there could be terms between him and the man who ordered his father's death. As if Tywin Lannister would ride personally to negotiate with a rebel king he has spent years trying to crush. In the great hall below, preparations for Edmure Tully's wedding feast continue, despite the murmur of concern that ripples through the servants. Lord Walder Frey sits in his chair on the dais, his ancient eyes gleaming with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety that his guests cannot yet interpret. At 90 years old, Walder has survived by reading the shifting winds of power, but today, those winds threaten to become a hurricane. Catelyn Stark enters the hall with measured steps, her face a mask of composure that conceals the growing dread in her heart. Lady Stark has buried a husband and believes she has lost 2 sons. Her remaining children are scattered across the realm, and her family's honor has been bought with blood and betrayal. Today, something feels wrong in a way that goes beyond her usual sorrows. Lord Walder, she says, as she approaches the dais, there are Lannister banners approaching your gates. Surely this cannot be coincidence. The Lord of the Twins turns his rheumy eyes toward her, and for a moment his mask slips. Catelyn sees something there that chills her to the bone. Guilt. Fear. The look of a man who has made a bargain with devils and begun to question its wisdom. My lady, Walder croaks, his voice like old leather. On such a joyous day, surely all the great houses of the realm should be represented. Even former enemies can find common ground in celebration. The words ring hollow, but before Catelyn can press him further, a commotion at the hall's entrance draws their attention. Rose Bolton enters with his usual quiet confidence, his pale eyes scanning the room like a predator, evaluating prey. The Lord of the Dreadfort moves to Walder's side, his voice too low for others to hear. He has arrived, Bolton murmurs, Tywin Lannister himself, with an escort of 50 men. Just as we discussed. Walder Frey's ancient hands tremble slightly as he grips the arms of his chair. The plan had seemed so simple when discussed in letters and whispered conversations. Kill Robb Stark. Kill his mother. Kill their supporters. Accept Lannister gold and protection in exchange for ending the Northern Rebellion. But with Tywin Lannister riding through his gates, the full weight of what they are about to attempt settles on his shoulders like a burial shroud. This changes nothing, Bolton continues, his voice without emotion. If anything, it ensures our success. With Lannister present, there can be no hesitation, no mercy, no survivors to carry tales. But Walder Frey has spent decades navigating the treacherous waters of Westeros politics, and he recognizes opportunity as clearly as he recognizes danger. With both Robb Stark and Tywin Lannister within his walls, the Lord of the Twins suddenly holds the fate of the realm in his aged hands. The question is whether he has the courage to seize that fate or the wisdom to avoid it entirely. Outside, Tywin Lannister dismounts in the courtyard of the Twins with the fluid grace of a man half his age. The Hand of the King surveys his surroundings with calculating eyes, noting the positions of guards, the layout of buildings, the faces of men who serve houses that have sworn different oaths. Everything appears as it should, yet something in the air suggests that appearances may prove deceptive. Sir Kevan Lannister remains close to his brother's side, his hand resting casually on his sword hilt. The boy is here, Kevan observes quietly. I saw his banners in the yard. The dire wolf of Stark flies alongside the trout of Tully. Good, Tywin replies, adjusting his riding gloves with deliberate precision. Then we will finish this business tonight and be riding home by morning." He pauses, studying the twin towers that rise above them like ancient monuments to divided loyalties. "Send word to our escort. They are to remain ready to depart at a moment's notice. Victory celebrations can wait until we are safely away from this place." Inside the hall, Robb Stark descends from the battlements with his mind racing. The presence of Lannister forces changes everything. Either this is the most elaborate trap in the history of Westeros, or something far more complex is unfolding. His wife Talisa waits for him near the high table, her dark eyes filled with concern as she reads the tension in his face. "What is it?" she asks, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "You look as though you've seen a ghost." "Perhaps I have," Robb replies grimly. "Tywin Lannister has come to the twins. The man who destroyed my father's honor and ordered his death now sits beneath the same roof as us." Talisa's face pales. "Then we should leave. Now! Before what?" Robb's voice carries the weight of kingship and the burden of decisions that have led him to this moment. "Before we dishonor ourselves by fleeing from a wedding we came to attend? Before we abandon Edmure to whatever fate awaits him? Before we prove to every lord in Westeros that the king in the north runs from his enemies?" The words hang between them like an unsheathed blade. Both understand that honor and pragmatism are about to collide, and that the result will determine not just their own fates, but the future of the North itself. In the courtyard, Tywin Lannister approaches the main entrance of the keep, flanked by guards whose loyalty has been tested in a dozen battles. He carries himself with the confidence of a man who has never doubted his own supremacy, never questioned his right to command the loyalty of lesser men. Tonight, that confidence will be put to its ultimate test. The great doors of the twins open to receive him, and the hand of the king steps inside to witness what he believes will be his greatest triumph. He does not yet know that he has also stepped into his tomb. Above them all, the setting sun casts the twin towers in shades of red and gold, as if the very stones weep blood for what is to come. The wedding feast of Edmure Tully will begin soon, and with it, the massacre that will reshape the Seven Kingdoms, but not in the way any of them expect. Chapter 3. The Feast of Fools. The Great Hall of the Twins has been transformed for celebration, its ancient stones draped with banners bearing the towers of House Frey and the leaping trout of House Tully. Hundreds of candles cast dancing shadows on the walls, their warm light creating an atmosphere of joy that masks the coldness in many hearts. The wedding of Edmure Tully and Roslyn Frey proceeds exactly as tradition demands, but tradition has never felt more like a trap. At the altar beneath the father's stern gaze, Edmure stands beside his bride with genuine happiness radiating from his weathered face. The Lord of Riverrun has endured years of war, loss, and political maneuvering, but tonight he believes he has found something pure amidst the chaos. Roslyn Frey appears almost ethereal in her wedding gown, her dark hair crowned with flowers, and her eyes bright with tears that could be joy or sorrow. "With this kiss, I pledge my love," Edmure declares, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. The traditional words echo off stone walls that have witnessed centuries of such ceremonies, though few have been conducted under such false pretenses. From his position at the high table, Tywin Lannister observes the proceedings with the detached interest of a man watching pieces move across a game board. The hand of the king sits beside Lord Walder Frey, his presence lending an air of legitimacy to what will soon become the most infamous violation of guest right in the history of the Seven Kingdoms. Tywin's green eyes move methodically across the assembled crowd, cataloguing faces, noting positions, measuring the distance between his guards and potential threats. A beautiful ceremony, Tywin remarks to his host, his voice carrying just enough warmth to sound sincere. Young love should always be celebrated, particularly when it serves to unite great houses. Walder Frey nods nervously, his ancient fingers drumming against his wine cup. The Lord of the Twins has played host to kings and rebels before, but never has he entertained guests while planning their murder. The weight of what is to come presses down on him like a millstone. Indeed, my lord, Walder croaks, though some unions prove more lasting than others. The double meaning hangs in the air between them, understood but unspoken. Tonight will end more than one marriage contract. Across the hall, Robb Stark rises from his seat as the ceremony concludes and the feast begins. The king in the north wears his crown with the easy confidence of youth, though lines of strain have appeared around his eyes in recent months. The execution of Rickard Karstark and the loss of half his army have taught him hard lessons about the cost of honor, but he has not yet learned the hardest lesson of all. "My king," says Sir Wendell Manderley, a rotund knight whose loyalty to House Stark runs as deep as his appetite. Perhaps it would be wise to retire early this evening. I noticed Lannister banners in the yard, and their presence here cannot bode well. Robb shakes his head, his auburn hair catching the candlelight. We came here to honor my uncle's wedding and repair our alliance with House Frey. To leave now would be an insult that Lord Walder would not forgive. He glances toward the high table where Tywin sits in conversation with their host. Besides, if the hand of the king wishes to negotiate, perhaps we can find terms that spare more bloodshed. The naivety of youth colors his words, and Wendell Manderley's face grows grave. But before the knight can voice further objections, the music begins, and Robb straightens his shoulders with determination. "I will dance with Lord Walder's daughters and granddaughters," Robb announces. "Let it never be said that the king in the north lacks courtesy." The irony of his gesture will become apparent all too soon. Musicians take their positions in the gallery above the hall, their instruments gleaming in the torchlight. Most are indeed musicians, men who have served House Frey for years and know nothing of what is to come. But among them stand others whose true loyalty lies not with melody, but with gold, whose crossbows are better tuned than their lutes. Catelyn Stark watches her son begin the traditional dance with one of Walder Frey's younger daughters, and her heart fills with a mother's pride mixed with inexplicable dread. Lady Stark has survived too many betrayals to ignore the warning signs that others miss, the way certain Frey men avoid meeting her eyes, the tension in Lord Walder's shoulders despite his host's smile, the presence of Tywin Lannister at what should be a purely Riverlands celebration. She rises from her seat and approaches the high table, her steps measured and her expression composed. Years of courtly training have taught her to hide her fears, but they have also taught her to recognize danger. "Lord Tywin," she says, with a curtsy that carries just enough respect to avoid insult. "What an unexpected honor to have the hand of the king grace my brother's wedding." Tywin turns his calculating gaze upon her, and Catelyn sees something there that chills her blood. Not hatred, though that would be expected. Not anger, though they are enemies. She sees satisfaction, the look of a man who holds all the pieces and is about to make his winning move. "Lady Stark," Tywin replies with courtly precision, "how could I miss such a joyous occasion? The union of great houses deserves witness from the highest levels of the realm." His smile never reaches his eyes. "I trust you are enjoying the hospitality of House Frey?" The question carries layers of meaning that Catelyn struggles to decipher. Around them, The feast continues with mounting energy as wine flows and musicians warm their instruments. Robb spins through the steps of an ancient dance, his partner giggling as he whispers something that makes her blush. The scene appears perfectly normal, perfectly safe, and that very perfection terrifies Catelyn more than any obvious threat could. The Freys have been most generous hosts, she answers carefully, though I confess surprise at your presence here, my lord. Surely the capital requires your attention during such troubled times. The capital is well in hand, Tywin says, sampling his wine with deliberate slowness. Sometimes the most important business takes place far from the throne room. Sometimes history is made in places like this hall, on nights like this one. Rose Bolton appears at Catelyn's shoulder with the silent approach that has always made her skin crawl. The Lord of the Dreadfoot moves like a spectre through the feast, his pale eyes reflecting the candlelight with an unsettling gleam. Lady Stark, Bolton says with false courtesy, your son dances beautifully. Such grace, such trust in his partners. The words carry an undertone that makes Catelyn's breath catch in her throat. Trust, Tywin repeats thoughtfully, a valuable commodity, though sometimes misplaced. The two men exchange a look that lasts only a moment but speaks volumes. In that instant, Catelyn understands the scope of the betrayal, the presence of Lannister forces, the nervous energy of their hosts. Everything falls into place with horrible clarity. "Excuse me," she says, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I must check on my son." As she moves away from the high table, her mind races through possibilities and plans. They are trapped in a web of treachery that spans multiple great houses, but they are not yet dead. And while they live, there remains hope. The question is whether that hope will prove sufficient against the forces arrayed against them. Above them, a musician tests his strings one final time before beginning a song that will signal the end of everything. The melody that has destroyed House Rain and House Tarbeck is about to claim new victims, though the composer of tonight's violence may find himself swept away by the very music he has orchestrated. The Feast of Fools continues, but the fools are not who anyone expects them to be. Chapter 4. When the music stops. The first notes of the Rains of Castamere drift down from the musicians' gallery like a funeral dirge disguised as celebration. The melody that destroyed House Rain and House Tarbeck now fills the great hall of the twins, its haunting refrain promising death to those who dare challenge Lannister power. Most of the wedding guests recognize the tune, but miss its significance. They see it as a gesture of respect from their Lannister guest, not as the signal for their own slaughter. Catelyn Stark knows better. The moment the familiar melody reaches her ears, every instinct screams danger. She has heard this song played at King's Landing, when Tywin celebrated his victories. She has heard it whispered by survivors of the Rhaenyra's destruction. And now she hears it here, in this hall, while her son dances unknowing to his death. "Robb," she calls, her voice cutting through the music with desperate urgency. "Come away from there, now." But her warning comes too late. The musicians above suddenly cast aside their instruments, revealing crossbows that gleam wickedly in the candlelight. Lord Walder Frey raises his hand in a prearranged signal, and the hall explodes into violence. The first volley of bolts tears through the celebrating Northmen like death itself. Sir Wendell Manderly falls with a crossbow quarrel in his throat, his final breath becoming a gurgling cry. Lord Umber staggers backward, clutching at the steel protruding from his chest. In seconds, the floor becomes slick with blood as Robb's most loyal bannermen die where they stand. Robb himself cries out as a bolt pierces his shoulder, spinning him away from his dancing partner. The king in the north draws his sword, even as blood seeps through his wedding finery, his blade singing as it clears its sheath. Around him, surviving Northmen scramble for weapons, while Frey soldiers pour through the hall's side entrances with steel in their hands. "Treachery!" Robb shouts, his voice carrying over the screams and clash of metal. "Defend yourselves! To me, men of the north!" At the high table, chaos reigns as lords and ladies scramble for safety. But while others flee or cower, Catelyn Stark moves with the deadly purpose of a mother defending her cubs. She sees Tywin Lannister rising from his seat, his hand moving toward his sword, and in that moment she realizes that the architect of this massacre stands within her reach. The small knife, hidden in her sleeve, slides into her palm with practiced ease. Before Tywin can fully stand, before his guards can react, Catelyn lunges forward and presses the blade against the hand of the king's throat. Her arm circles his chest, holding him tight against her, as his own momentum carries them both backward. "Stop!" she screams, her voice somehow audible above the carnage. "Stop this slaughter or I open his throat!" The effect is immediate and electric. Crossbow bolts continue to fly and swords continue to clash. But suddenly, every eye in the hall turns toward the high table where Catelyn holds the most powerful man in Westeros hostage. Tywin Lannister, who has never known defeat, who has crushed rebellions and toppled dynasties, finds himself helpless in the grip of a desperate mother. "Lady Stark," Tywin says, his voice remarkably calm despite the steel kissing his neck. "You seem to misunderstand the situation. Your son is already lost. Your cause is already defeated. My death will not save him." "Perhaps not," Catelyn replies, her breath hot against his ear. "But it will rob you of the satisfaction of watching him die, and perhaps it will give him a chance to escape." Across the hall, Roose Bolton stands frozen with his sword half drawn. The Lord of the Dreadfort has built his strategy around Lannister protection, around Tywin's promise of pardons and rewards for betraying the Starks. But if Tywin dies here, tonight, then those promises become worthless. Worse, they become chains that will drag House Bolton down with the falling Lannisters. "My lord," Bolton calls to Walder Frey, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Perhaps we should reconsider our approach." But Walder Frey has lived too long and made too many compromises to turn back now. The ancient lord pounds his walking stick against the floor, his face twisted with 90 years of accumulated resentment. "Kill them!" he shrieks, spittle flying from his lips. "Kill them all! I'll not be made a fool again!" The battle in the hall intensifies as more Frey soldiers pour in from the kitchens and side passages. But the Northmen, though outnumbered and surprised, fight with the fury of betrayed men. They form a protective circle around their wounded king, shields locked and swords gleaming as they sell their lives dearly. Robb, blood streaming from his shoulder wound, cuts down a Frey man-at-arms with a savage overhead stroke. "Mother!" he shouts, seeing her predicament at the high table. "Let him go! Save yourself!" "I will not abandon you again," Catelyn calls back, her voice breaking with emotion. "I will not watch another son die." Tywin tests her grip, feeling the strength in her arms and the steadiness of her blade. "You cannot hold me forever," he observes clinically. "My guards will cut you down. Your son will still die. This changes nothing." "It changes everything," Catelyn snarls. "Your death here makes this massacre a Frey betrayal, not a Lannister victory. Your death here means civil war in the south, while the north rallies to avenge their king. Your death here means your precious Cersei faces enemies on all sides without your protection." For the first time in decades, uncertainty flickers in Tywin Lannister's eyes. He has always calculated outcomes, always planned for contingencies. But he has never planned for this. He has never considered that his presence here would make him vulnerable rather than powerful. The realization hits him with the force of a physical blow. In seeking to witness his enemy's destruction, he has placed himself within reach of that same destruction. In trying to ensure victory through his presence, he has guaranteed that victory will be Pyrrhic at best. Around them, the battle continues to rage. Northern steel meets Frey bronze in a deadly dance, while crossbow bolts whistle through smoke-filled air. Men fall on both sides, but the Northmen fight with desperation, while the Freys fight with confidence. The outcome seems inevitable, yet somehow remains uncertain. "Lord Bolton," Tywin calls, his voice steady, despite the blade at his throat. "End this madness. You know your duty." But Rose Bolton hesitates still, his pale eyes calculating odds that shift with every passing second. He watches Catelyn hold Tywin hostage and sees opportunity where others see only chaos. If Tywin dies, someone must fill the vacuum of power. Someone must lead the forces that brought down the Starks. Someone who has proven his ruthlessness and strategic thinking. "Yes, my lord," Bolton says finally, raising his sword. "I know my duty." The question is whether that duty lies with his original allies or with a new vision of power altogether. In the smoke and blood of the Red Wedding, loyalties prove as flexible as the steel that writes history's final chapters. Catelyn tightens her grip on Tywin and prepares for whatever comes next. She may die in this hall, but she will not die quietly. And if the gods are kind, her son may yet live to see another dawn. The music has stopped, but the killing has only just begun. Chapter 5. The Mother's Gambit. The great hall of the twins has become a battlefield where steel rings against steel and dying men cry out for gods who seem absent. Blood pools between the ancient stones, while smoke from overturned torches creates a hellish haze. But at the high table, an entirely different kind of war unfolds, as Catelyn Stark holds the most powerful man in Westeros at knife point. "Lord Walder," Catelyn calls out, her voice cutting through the chaos with desperate authority. "Call off your men. Let my son and his followers depart in peace, and Lord Tywin lives to see another dawn." The blade pressed against Tywin's throat never wavers, though Catelyn's arm trembles with the strain of holding such a large man captive. The hand of the king remains perfectly still, understanding that even the slightest movement could open his jugular. For a man accustomed to absolute control, the helplessness burns more than any physical wound could. Walder Frey sits frozen in his great chair, his rheumy eyes darting between Catelyn's determined face and Tywin's rigid form. At 90 years old, the Lord of the Twins has survived by reading the shifting currents of power, but never has he faced a situation like this. His revenge against the Starks was supposed to be simple, final, absolute. Instead, it has become a nightmare of impossible choices. "You ask too much, Lady Stark," Walder croaks, his voice shaking with age and uncertainty. "Your son broke his word to my house, broke it before gods and men. Such insults demand blood." "And blood you shall have," Tywin says, his voice remarkably steady despite his predicament. "Mine, if necessary. But consider the consequences, Lord Frey. Kill me here, and my death becomes your responsibility. Cersei will not distinguish between the Starks who took me hostage and the Freys who failed to prevent it." The political calculation hits Walder like a physical blow. He had planned to eliminate the Starks and claim Lannister protection for his betrayal. But with Tywin's life hanging in the balance, that protection becomes meaningless. Worse, it becomes a threat that could destroy his entire house. Across the hall, Robb Stark rallies his surviving men with blood streaming from his wounded shoulder. The king in the north has fought his way to the great doors, leaving a trail of Frey corpses behind him. His sword drips red as he turns to face his enemies, his crown askew, but his spirit unbroken. "To me, men of the north," Robb shouts, his voice carrying over the din of battle. "Fight for your homes, fight for your families, fight for honor." Perhaps 24 Northmen remain on their feet, a pitiful remnant of the army that entered this hall. But they are hard men, veterans of years of war, and they form ranks around their king with grim determination. Behind them, the great doors of the hall stand tantalizingly close to freedom. Rose Bolton watches the developing situation with the cold calculation that has made him one of the most dangerous men in Westeros. The Lord of the Dreadfoot understands opportunity when he sees it, and this chaos presents possibilities that a straightforward massacre never could. With careful maneuvering, he might emerge from this night stronger than any faction. "Lord Fry," Bolton says, his voice carrying just enough volume to be heard at the high table. "Perhaps we should consider Lady Stark's proposal. A living Tywin Lannister who owes his life to our mercy might prove more valuable than a dead one who becomes a martyr." Tywin's green eyes flash with fury at the suggestion, but he cannot speak without risking the blade at his throat. Instead, he must listen as his supposed allies debate his fate like merchants haggling over goods. "Mercy!" Walder spits, pounding his walking stick against the floor. "Where was mercy when the young wolf shamed my house? Where was mercy when he cast aside my daughter for some foreign wench?" Catelyn tightens her grip on Tywin, feeling the tension in his powerful frame. "My son made a mistake," she admits, her voice breaking slightly. "A mistake born of youth and love, not malice. Must that mistake doom us all to this slaughter?" "Yes," comes a new voice from the shadows near the hall's entrance. "It must." Sir Lothar Frey emerges from behind a pillar, his sword bloody from the fighting. The younger son of Walder has always been ambitious, always eager to prove himself worthy of his father's favor. Tonight, he sees a chance to claim that favor through decisive action. "Father, you have planned this for months," Lothar continues, approaching the high table with determined steps. "We cannot falter now because of sentiment. Kill them all, and let history remember that House Frey keeps its word, even when others break theirs." The generational divide becomes apparent as father and son stare at each other across the blood-soaked hall. Walder sees the wisdom in cutting losses and preserving his house. Lothar sees only the glory of completing their revenge regardless of cost. Meanwhile, Tywin calculates his own position with the clarity that has made him the most feared man in the Seven Kingdoms. Even with a blade at his throat, his mind works through possibilities and contingencies. He understands that his greatest weapon now is not his guards or his gold, but his own reputation for ruthless retribution. "Lady Stark," Tywin says quietly, his words meant for her ears alone, "you cannot hold me forever. Your arm will tire. Your resolve will weaken. And when it does, my guards will cut you down, and your son will watch you die before joining you." "Perhaps," Catelyn whispers back, "but every moment I hold you is another moment my son lives. Every second is another chance for him to escape this trap you have set." Around them, the battle continues with increasing desperation. Northern steel meets Frey bronze in deadly exchanges, while crossbow bolts whistle through the smoke. But something has changed in the rhythm of the fighting. The Northmen no longer fight like cornered animals. They fight like men who believe they might live to see home again. Robb himself seems transformed by his mother's defiance. The wound in his shoulder still bleeds, but he moves with renewed purpose as he cuts down another Frey man-at-arms. His followers see their king's determination and match it with their own, pushing steadily toward the doors despite overwhelming odds. "Lord Bolton," Tywin calls, deciding to gamble on the man's notorious pragmatism. "You have always served the winning side. Consider carefully which side that might be if this night ends with my death." Bolton's pale eyes meet Tywin's gaze across the chaotic hall. For a moment, the two men engage in a silent conversation that requires no words. Both understand power, both understand survival, and both understand that the situation has become far more complex than anyone anticipated. "I serve the North," Bolton says finally, though his tone suggests multiple interpretations of those words. "And the North requires strong leadership to survive what is coming." The ambiguity of his statement sends ripples through the hall. Is he supporting Robb's escape? Planning to claim northern leadership for himself? Or simply positioning himself to benefit regardless of how this night ends? Catelyn feels Tywin's muscles tense as he prepares to test her resolve. The moment of truth approaches, and she knows that her next actions will determine not just her son's fate, but the future of the Seven Kingdoms. In holding the hand of the king hostage, she has changed the game entirely. Now she must play it to its conclusion. The sounds of battle continue around them, but everyone in the hall understands that the real war is being fought with words and will rather than swords and strength. The outcome will reshape the realm, though none can yet see how. Time slows as each faction considers its next move in this deadly Game of Thrones. Chapter 6. Blood and Calculation. The great hall of the twins reeks of blood and smoke, but for Rose Bolton, the chaos provides perfect cover for the most ambitious gambit of his life. The Lord of the Dreadfort has spent decades perfecting the art of survival, watching greater men rise and fall, while he endures through careful calculation. Tonight, he will prove that patience and cunning triumph over both honor and gold. From his position near the hall's center, Bolton surveys the scene with the detached interest of a general studying a battlefield. Catelyn Stark holds Tywin Lannister hostage at the high table, while Northern and Frey forces clash around them. Both sides believe they understand the stakes, but neither grasps the true scope of what is unfolding. Only Bolton sees the complete picture. He raises his hand in a subtle gesture, and scattered throughout the hall, men wearing Bolton colors acknowledge the signal. These are not the soldiers that Walder Frey expects, not the men committed to the original plan. These are Bolton's personal guard, loyal only to him, positioned strategically throughout the hall during the chaos of the feast. The first to fall is Sir Kevan Lannister, who fights his way through the melee toward his captive brother. The Hand's uncle cuts down 2 Frey men-at-arms with efficient sword strokes, his face grim with determination. But as he reaches the steps leading to the high table, a Bolton crossbow bolt takes him in the back. Kevan staggers, blood frothing from his lips, and turns to see his killer. "Bolton!" he gasps, understanding flooding his eyes. "You treacherous!" The second bolt silences him forever. Sir Kevan Lannister, brother to Tywin and loyal servant of House Lannister, dies on the steps he climbed to save his family's legacy. His death eliminates the last hope of Lannister reinforcement, leaving Tywin truly alone among enemies. At the high table, Tywin's face goes white as he watches his brother fall. The Hand of the King has survived 50 years of politics and war, but he has never felt such complete isolation. Even with a blade at his throat, his greatest fear is not death, but the realization that he has been outmaneuvered by a man he considered a useful tool. "What have you done?" Tywin demands, his voice carrying despite his compromised position. "Bolton, explain yourself." Roose Bolton approaches the high table with unhurried steps, stepping over corpses with the calm of a man walking through his own garden. His pale eyes reflect the torchlight with an unsettling gleam as he addresses the most powerful man in Westeros. "I have done what you taught me, my lord," Bolton says, his voice soft but carrying clearly through the chaos. "I have calculated the odds and chosen the winning side. Unfortunately for you, that side is no longer House Lannister." Catelyn's grip on Tywin tightens as she realizes the scope of the betrayal. "You planned this," she whispers. "All of it. Not just our deaths, but his as well." "Indeed," Bolton confirms with something approaching a smile. "The original plan was simple enough. Kill the Starks, claim Lannister protection, rule the North as Tywin's puppet. But a puppet's position is always precarious. Masters grow tired of puppets. They cut the strings when convenience demands it." Around them, the battle takes on a new character, as Bolton men engage both Northern and Frey forces with equal enthusiasm. The massacre has become a three-way slaughter, with Bolton's troops methodically eliminating anyone who might threaten their lord's future dominance. "You fool," Tywin snarls, his legendary composure finally cracking. "Without Lannister backing, you are nothing. The other northern houses will never accept your rule. Cersei will send armies to crush you like the insect you are." Bolton's smile becomes more pronounced. "Will she? With you dead and the royal treasury emptied by years of war? With Stannis Baratheon still claiming the throne and the Tyrells questioning their loyalty? Your daughter is many things, Lord Tywin, but she is not you. Without your guidance, she will make mistakes. Fatal mistakes." The political calculation is breathtaking in its scope and ruthlessness. Bolton has not simply planned to survive the War of the Five Kings. He has planned to emerge as the primary beneficiary of its chaos. With the Starks dead and the Lannisters weakened, he positions himself to fill the vacuum of power in the north. Near the great doors, Robb Stark rallies his surviving men for one final push toward freedom. The king in the north bleeds from multiple wounds, but his voice still carries the authority of command as he addresses his followers. "The North remembers," Robb shouts, the ancient words carrying new meaning in this hall of betrayal. "Remember this treachery. Remember these oaths broken. Remember, and make them pay." The cry is taken up by other northern voices, even as Bolton's men move to silence them. "The North remembers. The North remembers." The words echo off stone walls like a curse that will haunt the guilty for generations to come. But Roose Bolton hears those words without fear, because he understands something that the others do not. The North that remembers is the North of the past. He is building the North of the future, one where strength and cunning matter more than honor and tradition. A North that will endure because it adapts. "You see," Bolton continues, addressing both Tywin and Catelyn as if they are students in need of instruction. "Honor killed Brandon Stark and Rickard Stark. Honor killed Ned Stark. Honor would have killed Robb Stark tonight, even without my intervention. But pragmatism keeps a man alive and his house strong." Tywin's eyes narrow as he processes the full scope of Bolton's betrayal. The other conspirators, Walder Frey, his sons, they were never meant to survive this either. "Old Walder has served his purpose," Bolton confirms. "His house will not long survive the revelation of their role in tonight's massacre. The Riverlands will demand justice, and I will be happy to provide it. House Frey's lands and castles will need new stewards after all." The audacity is stunning. Bolton has not merely betrayed his allies, he has orchestrated their destruction as well. Every element of the Red Wedding has been designed to eliminate potential rivals, while positioning him as the sole survivor of the carnage. From across the hall, Lord Walder Frey shouts orders that increasingly fall on deaf ears. His own men begin to realize that the battle has evolved beyond their understanding, that forces they did not anticipate now control their fate. Some try to flee, others surrender to whichever army seems most likely to grant mercy. "The game has changed, Lord Tywin," Bolton says, drawing his sword with deliberate slowness. "Your gold bought you temporary allies, but it could not buy you permanent loyalty. Your reputation inspired fear, but fear fades when the one inspiring it becomes vulnerable." Catelyn realizes that her desperate gambit has become irrelevant. Whether she releases Tywin or kills him herself, Bolton will eliminate them both. The knife at Tywin's throat no longer provides leverage, because Bolton wants Tywin dead as much as he wants the Starks dead. "You cannot rule through fear alone," she tells Bolton, her voice steady despite their hopeless situation. "The North will resist you. Other houses will rise against you. You may win tonight, but you will not hold power." "Perhaps," Bolton acknowledges, "but I will have the chance to try, which is more than any of you will have." His pale eyes fix on Tywin's face, studying the expression of a man who has finally met his match. For decades, Tywin Lannister has been the supreme predator of Westeros politics. Tonight, he discovers what it feels like to be prey. The sounds of battle grow quieter as Bolton's men complete their work, systematically eliminating both Stark loyalists and potential Frey witnesses. Soon, only a handful of survivors will remain to tell the tale that Bolton chooses to tell. The Red Wedding will be remembered as a Frey betrayal that claimed the lives of both Stark and Lannister leadership, leaving the North in need of strong guidance from the only great house that emerged unscathed. Rose Bolton has orchestrated the perfect crime, one that will reshape the political landscape of Westeros, while appearing to be the random result of wartime chaos. All that remains is to complete the executions and begin the careful work of consolidation. The Game of Thrones has claimed another player, but the board itself belongs to those cunning enough to rewrite the rules entirely. Chapter 7. The Hand Falls. The Great Hall of the Twins has become a charnel house where the dreams of kingdoms die alongside the men who dared to dream them. Bodies lie strewn across blood-stained stones, while smoke from scattered torches creates a hellish haze that obscures the magnitude of the slaughter. But at the high table, history prepares to turn on a single sword stroke that will reshape the Seven Kingdoms forever. Rose Bolton stands before Tywin Lannister with his blade drawn, its steel reflecting the flickering torchlight like captured flame. The Lord of the Dreadfort has maneuvered through decades of political intrigue for this moment, and now he savors the sight of the most feared man in Westeros, reduced to helplessness in a desperate woman's grip. "You have one final opportunity to demonstrate your famous pragmatism, Lord Tywin," Bolton says, his voice carrying the soft menace that has made strong men tremble. "Order your remaining men to stand down. Accept your fate with dignity. Die like the great man you believe yourself to be." Tywin's green eyes burn with fury and something approaching disbelief. For 50 years he has dominated the political landscape of Westeros through careful calculation and ruthless application of force. But tonight all his advantages have evaporated, leaving him defenseless against an enemy he underestimated. "You think killing me wins you the North?" Tywin snarls, his voice hoarse from the blade pressed against his throat. "You are a fool, Bolton. My death makes you the primary target for every Lannister loyalist in the Seven Kingdoms. Cersei will not rest until your head decorates the walls of King's Landing." Bolton's pale eyes reflect genuine amusement at the threat. "Your daughter has many qualities, Lord Tywin, but strategic thinking is not among them. Without your guidance, she will make emotional decisions that serve my purposes perfectly." Around them, the last pockets of resistance crumble as Bolton's men complete their systematic slaughter. A few northern survivors fight their way toward the great doors, but their numbers dwindle with each passing moment. Soon, only carefully selected witnesses will remain to tell the tale that Bolton chooses to tell. Catelyn Stark feels the weight of inevitability settling over her like a burial shroud. Her desperate gambit has failed, her son faces certain death, and her family's honor will die with them in this accursed hall. But even in defeat, she refuses to grant her enemies easy victory. "If you mean to kill us all," she says to Bolton, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face, "then do it quickly. But know this, the North will remember what happened here tonight. They will remember your treachery, and they will make you pay for it." "The North will remember what I tell them to remember," Bolton replies with cold certainty. "Tonight will be remembered as the night House Frey betrayed their guests and murdered both Stark and Lannister leadership. I will be the loyal lord who tried to prevent the massacre, but arrived too late to save anyone." The audacity of his fabrication is breathtaking. Not content with simple murder, Bolton plans to rewrite history itself, transforming his betrayal into heroism and his crimes into tragedy. The dead cannot contradict his version of events, and the living will have no choice but to accept it. Near the hall's entrance, Robb Stark makes one final stand with the remnants of his guard. The king in the north bleeds from multiple wounds, but his sword arm remains strong as he cuts down another Bolton man-at-arms. Behind him, the great doors stand tantalizingly close, offering escape if he can reach them. "Mother!" Robb shouts across the chaos, his voice carrying despite the din of battle. "Whatever happens, know that you raised sons who died with honor." The words hit Catelyn like physical blows, but they also kindle something fierce in her heart. Her son faces death with courage, and she will not dishonor his memory by showing weakness in her final moments. With a sudden, desperate movement, she releases Tywin and lunges away from the high table. The hand of the king staggers forward, free at last, but too late to matter. Bolton's sword takes him in the chest before he can draw breath to speak, the blade sliding between his ribs with practiced precision. Tywin Lannister, Hand of Kings, Lord of Casterly Rock, and the most powerful man in the Seven Kingdoms, falls to his knees with blood frothing from his lips. His legendary composure finally cracks as he stares at the steel protruding from his chest, understanding at last that all his careful planning has led to this moment of ultimate powerlessness. "The Lannisters send their regards," Bolton says mockingly, echoing the words Rose was meant to speak when killing Robb Stark. Though in this case, the regards are somewhat different than originally planned. Tywin tries to speak, but blood fills his throat, and his words become a gurgling whisper. The man who destroyed House Rayne and House Tarbeck, who sacked King's Landing and broke the reigns of Castamere, dies with his enemy's laughter echoing in his ears. The effect of his death ripples through the hall like a stone dropped in still water. Even Bolton's men pause in their slaughter to stare at the fallen hand, unable to quite believe that such a figure of legend could be brought so low. In that moment of stunned silence, Catelyn Stark runs. She moves with the desperate energy of a mother trying to save her child, dodging fallen bodies and scattered weapons as she races toward her son. Bolton's men recover quickly, but the momentary distraction has given her precious seconds to reach the group of survivors near the doors. "The doors!" Catelyn screams. "Break them down! Get my son out of this place!" What follows is a chaotic melee as the surviving Northmen fight their way through the entrance while Bolton's forces rally to stop them. Robb takes a crossbow bolt in the leg but remains standing, supported by loyal men who would die before abandoning their king. In the confusion, perhaps a dozen survivors escape into the night, carrying with them news that will shake the foundations of the Seven Kingdoms. Robb Stark lives, Catelyn Stark lives, and Tywin Lannister is dead, killed by the very allies he thought he could control. Ravens take flight from the twins within the hour, carrying word of the massacre to every corner of Westeros. The messages are carefully crafted to support Bolton's version of events. House Frey betrayed their guests, both Stark and Lannister leadership perished, and only quick action by loyal northern lords prevented total catastrophe. But other ravens fly as well, carrying different messages from survivors who escaped the slaughter. These birds wing their way to King's Landing, to River Run, to every great house with the truth of what transpired at the Red Wedding. The realm will know that Tywin Lannister died not as a victim of Frey treachery, but as the architect of his own destruction. In the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister sits in her chambers when the news arrives. The Queen Regent reads the message 3 times before its meaning penetrates her disbelief. Her father, the bedrock upon which all Lannister power rests, is dead. Killed by northern rebels and traitorous allies in a hall that should have been safe under guest right. "No," she whispers, crushing the parchment in her trembling hands. "No, this cannot be true. Father does not die. Father does not lose. Father always wins." But the raven carries no lies, only the terrible truth that will reshape her world. Without Tywin's strategic mind and iron will, the Lannister dynasty faces enemies on all sides, with only Cersei's volatile emotions to guide them. The Game of Thrones has claimed its greatest player, leaving the board in chaos. Somewhere in the Riverlands, Jaime Lannister receives word of his father's death and feels the ground shift beneath his feet. The man he has spent his life trying to please, trying to disappoint, trying to understand, is gone. The golden lion of Casterly Rock has fallen, and with him the certainty that Lannister strength could overcome any challenge. The Red Wedding is over, but its consequences are just beginning. Tywin Lannister's death creates a vacuum of power that ambitious men across the realm will rush to fill. The War of the Five Kings has become something entirely new, a struggle not just for crowns, but for survival in a world where the old certainties no longer apply. In death, Tywin has achieved something he never managed in life. He has made his enemies stronger than his allies. The North remembers, and now it has martyrs to avenge and hope to sustain its resistance. The game continues, but the rules have changed forever. Chapter 8. Lions Without a Pride. The throne room of the Red Keep has never felt more cavernous than it does this morning, as Queen Regent Cersei Lannister paces before the Iron Throne like a caged lioness whose cubs are threatened. The raven's message lies crumpled on the floor where she cast it after reading its contents for the 10th time, hoping the words would somehow change. But ravens carry only truth, and the truth is that her father is dead, killed by northern rebels in a place that should have been sanctuary. "Summon the small council," she commands Grand Maester Pycelle, her voice sharp with barely controlled hysteria. "All of them. Now. And send word to every lord in the Crown Lands. They are to bring their armies to King's Landing immediately." The ancient Maester's face appears even more haggard than usual as he bows his acceptance of her orders. Pycelle has served the Iron Throne through multiple reigns, but he has never seen the realm's stability rest on such precarious foundations. Without Tywin's iron will to enforce royal authority, even loyal houses may begin to question their allegiances. "At once, Your Grace," Pycelle murmurs, though perhaps we should consider the wording of such summons carefully. Panic serves no one's interests. Cersei whirls on him with the fury of grief and terror combined. "Panic? You speak of panic when my father lies dead in some god-forsaken hall, when enemies surround us on all sides and whisper of our weakness?" Her voice rises to near shrieking pitch. There will be no careful wording. There will be absolute loyalty or absolute destruction. The emotional outburst reveals everything that Tywin's enemies hoped to achieve through his death. Without her father's strategic mind to guide her, Cersei defaults to the reactive, emotional decision-making that has always been her weakness. She sees threats everywhere and responds with the blunt instrument of royal authority rather than the subtle manipulation that made Tywin so effective. In his chambers deep within the Red Keep, Tyrion Lannister stares at his own copy of the message with emotions too complex for simple categorization. His father is dead, killed by the very conspiracy he orchestrated, and Tyrion finds himself uncertain whether to mourn or celebrate. The man who shaped his life through constant disappointment and occasional cruelty will never again have the power to make him feel small and worthless. "My lord?" Podrick Payne ventures tentatively from the doorway. "The Queen Regent requests your presence in the throne room." Tyrion sets down the parchment and reaches for his wine cup, finding comfort in its familiar weight. "Requests?" How wonderfully polite of her. He drinks deeply before continuing. "Tell my dear sister that I will attend her shortly. And Pod? Bring me another bottle. Something expensive. Today seems like a day for expensive wine." The irony is not lost on him that his father's death may prove to be his liberation. For years, Tyrion has lived under the shadow of Tywin's expectations and judgments, always striving for approval that would never come. Now, with that shadow lifted, he faces both opportunity and danger in equal measure. Cersei will need his counsel more than ever, but she will also blame him for every failure that follows. The small council chamber buzzes with nervous energy as the realm's most powerful advisors gather in emergency session. Lord Petter Baelish sits with his usual composed expression, though his mind clearly races through the new opportunities that Tywin's death presents. Varys maintains his customary serenity, but his small hands fidget with papers that contain intelligence from across the Seven Kingdoms. "Gentlemen," Cersei announces as she sweeps into the chamber, her red and gold gown flowing behind her like a banner of war. "As you have all heard, treacherous enemies have murdered the hand of the king. The realm faces its greatest crisis since Robert's rebellion." "Your Grace," Varys interjects with silky politeness, "perhaps we should discuss the precise nature of this crisis before determining our response. The messages from the twins contain conflicting accounts of events." Cersei's green eyes flash with dangerous fire. "Conflicting accounts? My father is dead, Master of Whisperers. That is not a conflict. That is a fact, and facts demand response, not endless discussion." Tyrion enters the chamber at that moment, his uneven gait somehow more pronounced than usual. The wine has steadied his nerves, but cannot entirely mask the turmoil beneath his composed exterior. He takes his seat without ceremony, noting the way conversation dies as council members assess his reaction to their shared loss. "Brother," Cersei acknowledges coldly, "how gracious of you to join us. I trust you have thoughts on how to respond to this tragedy." The word drips with accusation, as if she blames him somehow for their father's fate. Tyrion meets her gaze steadily, recognizing the barely controlled panic beneath her queenly mask. "Indeed I do, sister dear," he replies with careful neutrality. "First, we must understand exactly what happened at the Twins. Father was not careless. If he died there, it was because he underestimated someone or something. We need to identify what that was before we can avoid repeating his mistake." Littlefinger leans forward with his characteristic half-smile. "From what my sources report, Lord Bolton appears to have turned on all sides. He eliminated both Stark and Lannister leadership, positioning himself as the surviving power in the north. Quite audacious. The revelation sends ripples of unease through the chamber. If Bolton could betray Tywin Lannister himself, then no alliance can be considered secure. The Game of Thrones has become far more dangerous with the supreme player removed from the board. Bolton. Cersei spits the name like a curse. We will crush him. We will crush them all. Send ravens to every Lannister bannerman. They are to march north and burn the Dreadfoot to ash." "Your Grace," Tyrion says carefully, "our armies are already committed across multiple fronts. The royal treasury is nearly empty. Perhaps revenge should wait until we have secured our own position." His practical counsel only inflames her fury further. "Secured our position? Our position was secured by my father's strength. Now that he is gone, our position depends on showing enemies that Lannister vengeance is swift and terrible. Across the narrow sea, other powers take note of the chaos consuming Westeros. Ravens carry word to Essos, to the free cities, to anyone with interests in the political stability of the Seven Kingdoms. The death of Tywin Lannister creates opportunities for intervention that ambitious rulers will not ignore. But it is in the Riverlands where the news carries the greatest immediate impact. Jaime Lannister receives word of his father's death while riding toward King's Landing with a small escort. The Kingslayer dismounts and reads the message 3 times before its meaning fully penetrates his disbelief. "Sir Jaime," his captain ventures. "Are you well, my lord?" Jaime looks up from the parchment with eyes that have aged years in moments. His father, the man whose approval he spent his life seeking and whose expectations he consistently failed to meet, is gone. The golden son of Casterly Rock has become the heir to a legacy built on ash and ambition. "Double our pace," Jaime orders, his voice hoarse with emotion. "We ride for the capital with all speed. My sister will need me now more than ever." What he does not yet understand is that his sister's needs and the realm's needs have diverged so completely that serving one may require betraying the other. The Lannister dynasty stands at a crossroads, and the choices made in the coming days will determine whether it survives its founder's death or dies with him. Back in King's Landing, noble houses begin the delicate process of reassessing their loyalties. Tywin's death doesn't immediately free them from their oaths, but it raises questions about the wisdom of remaining bound to a crown that grows less stable by the hour. Ravens fly from great keeps across the realm as lords seek to understand the new political landscape before committing themselves to any particular course. The Tyrells of Highgarden huddle in conference, weighing the advantages of their current alliance against the opportunities that chaos might present. The Martells of Dorne watch from their southern fastness, calculating how Tywin's death might serve their ancient grievances against House Lannister. Even in the Vale, where Lord Petter Baelish's influence grows stronger each day, political possibilities shift like sand in the wind. The Game of Thrones has lost its most skilled player, and every remaining contestant must now adapt to rules that no longer guarantee predictable outcomes. Cersei ends the small council meeting with demands that cannot be met, and threats that cannot be enforced. Her emotional response to crisis reveals the fundamental weakness that Tywin's presence had concealed for years. Without his strategic mind to guide royal policy, the Iron Throne becomes merely another prize in the great game rather than the supreme authority that enforces the rules. The lions are indeed without their pride, and the kingdom bleeds for their loss. Chapter 9. The Wolf Endures. 3 days' ride south of the Twins, in a holdfast that has sheltered Stark loyalists for generations, Robb Stark awakens to find himself alive against all odds. The small keep of House Mallister provides sanctuary for the survivors of the Red Wedding, its walls offering protection, while ravens carry word of the massacre across the realm. The king in the north lives, though his crown sits heavy with the blood of betrayed friends and the weight of lessons learned through suffering. Maester Vance tends to Robb's wounds with gentle hands, cleaning the crossbow punctures and sword cuts that mark his escape from the Twins. The young king bears his pain without complaint, understanding that physical healing will come more easily than the restoration of his cause. Around him, the survivors of his guard speak in hushed tones of the horrors they witnessed and the miracle of their survival. "Your Grace," says Sir Wendell Manderly's younger brother, Sir Wyllis, who escaped the slaughter by pure chance. "Word comes from across the north. The great houses call their banners in your name. They say the Red Wedding has awakened something in our people that years of war could not touch." Robb nods slowly, wincing as the movement pulls at his shoulder wound. The irony is not lost on him that surviving treachery has accomplished what winning battles could not. His enemies meant to destroy him through betrayal, but they have instead transformed him from a rebel king into a martyred victim whose cause now burns brighter than ever. "What word from Winterfell?" he asks, though the answer brings fresh pain. "What word from Bran and Rickon?" The silence that follows tells him everything. Winterfell has fallen, his brothers are missing or dead, and his ancestral seat lies in the hands of those who betrayed guest right and murdered under the protection of bread and salt. The North remembers, but it remembers losses as well as victories. In the chamber beside his own, Catelyn Stark sits by the window and stares at nothing. Lady Stark has not spoken since they escaped the Twins, her mind retreating from horrors too great to process. The strong woman who held Tywin Lannister at knife point now trembles at sudden sounds and starts when anyone approaches too quickly. "Mother needs time," Robb tells the Maester quietly. "She has seen too much death, lost too many sons. The Red Wedding may have broken something in her that cannot be easily repaired. But even broken, Catelyn's presence serves a purpose. The sight of Lady Stark, wounded and traumatized by the betrayal she witnessed, reminds every northern lord of the price of trusting oathbreakers. Her suffering becomes a symbol that rallies more men to Robb's cause than any speech or proclamation could achieve. Ravens arrive hourly with messages of support from across the north and Riverlands. Lord Karstark's heir, despite his father's execution, pledges renewed loyalty in the face of Frey betrayal. The mountain clans of the Vale send word that they remember their ancient ties to Winterfell. Even some Crown Lands houses, disturbed by reports of Tywin's death, begin to question their allegiances to an increasingly unstable Iron Throne. "The Lords smell weakness in King's Landing," explains Sir Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, who arrived with reinforcements from Riverrun. "Tywin's death has shaken the very foundations of Lannister power. Without his iron will to hold their coalition together, old resentments surface, and new opportunities arise." The political calculation has shifted dramatically in Robb's favour. Where once he was seen as a northern rebel challenging legitimate royal authority, he is now viewed as the victim of unprecedented treachery. The violation of guest right at the Red Wedding has outraged even neutral lords, while Tywin's death has removed the strategic mind that held the Lannister alliance together. "Uncle," Robb says to the Blackfish, "what word from the other kingdoms? How do they respond to these developments?" Brynden Tully's weathered face shows grim satisfaction as he unfolds a collection of Raven's messages. Stannis Baratheon marches south from the Wall with renewed purpose, claiming that Tywin's death proves the gods favor his claim. The Tyrells hedge their bets by maintaining their alliance while secretly negotiating with other powers. Dawn watches and waits, as Dawn always does. Most significantly, the narrative of the Red Wedding has begun to shift in ways that favor Robb's cause. Bolton's attempt to blame the massacre entirely on House Frey has failed as survivors carry the truth across Westeros. Lords now understand that this was not simply a betrayal between great houses, but a calculated attempt to eliminate both Stark and Lannister leadership for Bolton's personal gain. "They call Bolton the Turncloak now," reports Sir Smalljon Umber, son of the Greatjon. Even his own bannermen question his version of events. Word spreads that he killed Lannister and Stark alike, that he planned the whole thing from the beginning. The revelation transforms Bolton from a pragmatic survivor into a universally despised oathbreaker. Where he hoped to emerge as the legitimate ruler of a pacified North, he instead finds himself isolated and surrounded by enemies who question his every claim to authority. In the fortnight that follows, Robb's forces grow from a handful of survivors to a substantial army as northern houses rally to his banner with unprecedented unity. The shared outrage over the Red Wedding creates bonds between formerly feuding houses, while the knowledge that their king survived impossible odds inspires something approaching religious fervor in his followers. "They say you cannot be killed," young Lord Glover tells Robb during one of the many councils that plan their next moves. "They say the old gods protected you at the Twins because your cause is just." Robb does not encourage such talk, but neither does he discourage it. A king who survives treachery and returns stronger than before becomes the stuff of legend, and legends inspire men to fight battles that practical considerations would deem hopeless. The planning sessions grow more detailed as Robb's strength returns and his forces organize. The immediate priority is revenge against those who violated guest right. But the longer-term goal involves something more ambitious: the complete restructuring of northern politics with House Stark as the undisputed authority, and House Bolton as a cautionary tale. "We will retake Winterfell," Robb declares to his assembled lords, his voice carrying the certainty that has always marked his decisions. "We will reclaim the North, and we will ensure that oathbreakers face justice for their crimes." But unlike his earlier campaigns, this effort will be conducted with the support of houses that previously remained neutral or opposed him. The Red Wedding has clarified loyalties in ways that years of conventional warfare could not achieve. Lords who might have negotiated with Bolton now see him as an existential threat to the entire feudal system. "The Freys must answer for their crimes as well," adds Lord Blackwood of Raventree Hall, whose own house suffered losses at the massacre. Guest right is sacred. When it dies, civilization dies with it. The moral authority that Robb now commands extends beyond simple northern loyalty. He represents something that transcends regional politics, the principle that honor and hospitality must be defended against those who would exploit them for personal gain. This transformation, from rebel king to champion of sacred laws, gives his cause a legitimacy that military victories alone could never provide. As the days pass and his strength returns, Robb begins to understand that surviving the Red Wedding has accomplished something that winning every battle of the war could not. He is no longer fighting to preserve northern independence. He is fighting to restore the moral order that betrayers like Bolton and the Freys have violated. The wolf endures, and with it, the hope that justice can triumph over treachery, that honor can defeat ambition, and that the North will indeed remember those who stood with it in its darkest hour. The Game of Thrones continues, but the rules have changed in ways that favor those who play it with clean hands and pure hearts. Chapter 10. New Alliances. The Great Hall of Dragonstone echoes with the sound of steel being sharpened as King Stannis Baratheon prepares for a campaign that will reshape the Seven Kingdoms. News of Tywin Lannister's death has reached the ancient Targaryen stronghold, and with it comes opportunity that the rightful king of Westeros intends to seize with both hands. The man who ground his teeth through years of setbacks now sees a path to victory opening before him like the dawn breaking over Blackwater Bay. "My king," says Sir Davos Seaworth, his weathered face showing the cautious optimism that has marked their recent correspondence with northern lords. The ravens from White Harbour bring encouraging news. Lord Manderley has declared for your cause, citing the violations of guest right at the Red Wedding as proof that the Iron Throne has lost all legitimacy. Stannis nods grimly as he studies the map of Westeros spread across the table before him. Red markers indicate Lannister holdings, blue shows his own limited territory, and green marks the growing list of houses that have declared neutrality or outright opposition to Cersei's regency. With Tywin dead, the careful alliance that held the Crown's supporters together has begun to fracture along predictable lines. The pretender Joffrey's reign was always built on his grandfather's strength, Stannis declares, his voice carrying the iron certainty that has defined his character since childhood. Without Tywin's gold and strategic mind, that bastard boy's claim becomes what it always was, a lie supported by diminishing force. The political calculation is sound. Tywin's death has not merely removed a powerful enemy, it has eliminated the architect of the entire Lannister power structure. Without his ability to balance competing interests and enforce loyalty through fear, the coalition supporting Joffrey's rule shows signs of imminent collapse. Further south, in the gardens of High Garden, where the roses bloom eternal, Lord Mace Tyrell meets with his mother to discuss their family's precarious position. The Tyrells have grown powerful through their alliance with the Crown, but that alliance was built on the assumption that Lannister strength would endure. Now, with reports of chaos in King's Landing and Tywin's death confirmed, even the most optimistic assessments suggest difficult times ahead. "The Queen is hysterical," reports Olenna Tyrell, the Queen of Thorns, whose network of informants rivals that of any spy master. She makes demands that cannot be met and threatens lords who no longer fear her authority. Without Tywin to provide guidance, she resembles nothing so much as a child playing at being queen. Lord Mace shifts uncomfortably in his chair, recognizing the implications of his mother's assessment. The Tyrells have committed significant resources to supporting Joffrey's reign, and their daughter Margaery's marriage to the boy king has tied their fate to his success. But even family loyalty has limits when survival is at stake. "What do you propose, mother?" he asks, though he suspects he already knows her thoughts on the matter. "Prudence," Olenna replies with a smile that has intimidated kings and rebels alike. "We maintain our alliance while quietly exploring alternatives. If young Joffrey's reign collapses, we must be positioned to benefit from whatever emerges from the chaos." The conversation represents a broader pattern playing out across the realm as great houses reassess their commitments in light of changing circumstances. Loyalty bought with gold becomes negotiable when the gold runs out, and fear inspired by distant threats fades when those threats are eliminated. In Dawn, where patience is considered a virtue and revenge a sacrament, Prince Doran Martell receives reports of the Northern massacre with interest that borders on satisfaction. The death of Tywin Lannister does not erase the murder of his sister Aelia or her children, but it removes the primary obstacle to more aggressive action against those responsible. "The Lannisters are weak," observes Prince Oberyn Martell, his voice carrying the anticipation of a warrior long denied the chance for honorable combat. "Now is the time to strike, brother. Now is the time to remind Westeros that Dawn remembers its grievances." But Doran has not survived decades of political intrigue through rash action. His mind works through possibilities and consequences with the methodical precision that has kept Dawn independent while other kingdoms bled. Tywin's death creates opportunities, but it also creates dangers that must be carefully navigated. "Patience, Oberyn," Doran counsels, though his own thoughts turn increasingly toward action. "Let our enemies destroy each other before we reveal our true intentions. The time for vengeance will come, but it will come on our terms." Meanwhile, in the Vale of Arryn, Lord Petyr Baelish sits in his chambers at the Eyrie and calculates how Tywin's death serves his own long-term ambitions. Littlefinger has spent years positioning himself to benefit from chaos, and the current situation provides opportunities that exceed his most optimistic projections. With careful maneuvering, he might emerge from the coming struggle as one of the most powerful men in Westeros. "The king is dead. Long live the king," he murmurs to himself as he composes letters to various contacts across the realm. Each message is carefully crafted to plant seeds of doubt, offer tempting opportunities, or provide information that will encourage recipients to act in ways that serve Baelish's interests. His particular focus is on the growing alliance between Robb Stark and various neutral houses. If he can position himself as a valuable mediator between competing factions, his influence will grow regardless of which side ultimately prevails. The Game of Thrones favors those who play all sides, while committing fully to none. Back in the north, Robb Stark receives a steady stream of visitors, as lords who previously remained neutral seek to align themselves with his resurgent cause. The moral authority derived from surviving the Red Wedding, combined with the practical advantages of Tywin's death, has transformed the political landscape in ways that make new alliances both possible and profitable. "Lord Glover brings word from the Mountain clans," reports the Blackfish during one of their evening councils. They offer their swords to reclaim Winterfell and punish the oathbreakers who violated guest right. More significantly, ravens have begun arriving from houses outside the traditional northern sphere of influence. Riverland's lords who survived the war seek protection from the chaos consuming the realm. Some minor Crown Lands houses, disturbed by reports of instability in King's Landing, quietly explore alternatives to continued Lannister loyalty. "We must be careful," Robb cautions his assembled advisors. "These new allies come to us from desperation or opportunity, not from deep loyalty. We must prove ourselves worthy of their trust while remaining vigilant against potential betrayal." The lesson of the Red Wedding weighs heavily on all their deliberations. Trust, once given carelessly, must now be earned through demonstrated virtue and carefully tested through graduated commitments. No alliance will be accepted without guarantees, and no guarantee will be considered absolute. But the most significant development comes from an unexpected source. A raven arrives bearing the seal of House Stark, though not from any known Stark holding. The message, when decoded, reveals that Arya Stark lives and has been in contact with supporters throughout the realm. Her survival, combined with Robb's, means that the Stark line endures despite all attempts to destroy it. 2 wolves remain where our enemies thought none survived, Robb observes as he reads his sister's carefully coded message. They believed they had eliminated House Stark entirely. Instead, they have created martyrs whose very existence undermines their claims to legitimacy. The psychological impact of this revelation extends far beyond simple family loyalty. Houses that might have accepted Stark destruction as a fait accompli must now reconsider their positions in light of the family's apparent resilience. Dead martyrs inspire songs and stories. Living martyrs inspire armies and revolutions. As word spreads of these developments, the careful balance that Tywin maintained through fear and gold continues to deteriorate. Lords who remained loyal out of prudence begin to question whether that prudence serves their long-term interests. The Game of Thrones has entered a new phase where moral authority competes with naked power, and the outcome remains far from certain. The ravens continue to fly, carrying messages that will reshape the map of Westeros. Alliances form and dissolve with increasing frequency, as each house seeks to position itself for whatever emerges from the chaos. The death of one man has unleashed forces that will determine the fate of kingdoms, and the ultimate victor may well be someone who has not yet revealed their hand. In this new landscape of shifting loyalties and emerging opportunities, the only certainty is that the old order built on Lannister gold and Tywin's reputation is dying. What will replace it remains to be written in blood and steel across the battlefields of the 7 kingdoms. Chapter 11. The Price of Betrayal. The great hall of the Dreadfort has never felt more isolated than it does on this grey morning, as Lord Roose Bolton sits in his high seat and contemplates the ruins of his grand design. Ravens perch in the windows like carrion birds, bringing news that grows worse with each passing day. The master plan that was supposed to secure his dominance of the north has instead made him the most hated man in the 7 kingdoms, surrounded by enemies who grow bolder with each report of his weakness. "My lord," says Ramsay Bolton, his bastard son, whose cruelty has always exceeded even Rose's own, perhaps it is time to consider more aggressive measures against those who refuse to acknowledge your authority. Rose studies his heir with the cold calculation that has defined his approach to politics for decades. Ramsay's solution to every problem involves flaying and torture, but brute force cannot solve the crisis they now face. The northern houses do not merely refuse to acknowledge Bolton authority. They actively work to undermine it at every opportunity. "The Umbers have declared me a kinslayer and oathbreaker," Rose reports with characteristic lack of emotion. "House Mormont refuses to answer ravens sent in my name. The mountain clans speak openly of marching on the Dreadfoot to deliver northern justice for my crimes. Each piece of news represents another failure in his carefully constructed plan." Bolton had counted on northern pragmatism, the assumption that lords would eventually accept accomplished facts rather than continue bleeding for lost causes. Instead, the violation of guest right at the Red Wedding has awakened something primordial in the northern character that renders practical considerations irrelevant. The situation grows worse when ravens arrive from King's Landing, bearing the royal seal. Cersei's message contains none of the grateful cooperation that Rose had expected from his service to the crown. Instead, it seethes with barely controlled rage and demands that he present himself in the capital to answer for his father's death. "She blames me for Tywin's murder," Rose observes to his assembled advisers, men whose loyalty was bought with promises of advancement that now seem increasingly hollow. "The Queen believes I orchestrated the entire massacre specifically to eliminate both Stark and Lannister leadership." The irony is sharp enough to draw blood. Rose's plan was indeed to eliminate both factions, but he had intended to frame it as service to the crown rather than betrayal of it. Cersei's emotional response to her father's death has transformed Bolton from valuable ally to primary suspect, making him a target for royal vengeance rather than a recipient of royal favor. "What does she demand?" asks Walton Steelshanks, one of Bolton's most trusted captains, though his trust wavers as their position deteriorates. "My immediate presence in King's Landing to explain my actions," Rose replies. "An invitation that resembles a summons to my own execution." The political calculation that seemed so elegant at the Red Wedding has become a death trap that tightens with each passing day. Bolton faces enemies from every direction: northern houses that view him as a traitor, southern lords who blame him for Tywin's death, and royal authority that questions his loyalty to the crown. Meanwhile, at the Twins, Lord Walder Frey confronts his own version of the same nightmare. The ancient lord sits in his hall and listens to reports that grow more dire with each messenger. Houses throughout the Riverlands have declared House Frey anathema, refusing trade, marriage alliances, or even basic diplomacy with the architects of the Red Wedding massacre. "They call us kingslayers and kinslayers," reports Sir Lothar Frey, whose enthusiasm for the massacre has curdled into bitter regret. "Lord Blackwood has sworn to feed our entrails to his ravens. The Brackens offer land grants to anyone who brings them Frey heads." Walder pounds his walking stick against the floor with futile rage. At 90 years old, he has survived by reading the political winds and adjusting his sails accordingly. But the Red Wedding has created a storm that no amount of maneuvering can navigate. The violation of guest right has marked his house for destruction in ways that transcend normal political competition. "And what of our supposed allies?" Walder croaks. "What word from the Boltons and their promises of mutual support?" The silence that follows provides its own answer. Roose Bolton faces his own crisis and has no resources to spare for Frey's survival. The alliance that was supposed to divide the spoils of victory has become a mutual suicide pact as both houses sink beneath the weight of universal condemnation. The military situation deteriorates as rapidly as the political one. Robb Stark's forces, strengthened by volunteers from across the North and Riverlands, have begun systematic attacks on Bolton and Frey holdings. These are not raids for plunder or strategic advantage, but targeted strikes designed to demonstrate that betrayers will face consequences for their crimes. Last Hearth reports that Stark forces burned 3 Bolton villages in a single day, says Master Qyburn, whose loyalty to House Bolton depends entirely on their continued ability to protect him. They left the people unharmed, but destroyed every structure bearing Bolton banners. The symbolic impact exceeds the material damage. By demonstrating their ability to strike Bolton holdings at will while maintaining the moral authority to spare innocents, Robb's forces prove that justice and mercy can coexist. The contrast with Bolton's reputation for indiscriminate cruelty makes the message even more powerful. More significantly, the attacks reveal the complete collapse of Bolton intelligence networks. Roose had prided himself on knowing everything that happened in the North, but his betrayal at the Red Wedding has closed every source of information. Northern houses that once provided intelligence now feed him false reports or maintain complete silence. "We cannot defend what we cannot see coming," observes Ramsay, his usual enthusiasm for violence tempered by the practical reality of their isolation. "Our enemies move freely, while we sit blind in our strongholds." The situation forces Roose to confront the fundamental flaw in his grand design. He had calculated that eliminating rival leadership would create a vacuum that he could fill through superior organization and ruthless efficiency. Instead, his betrayal has inspired unified resistance that treats him as an existential threat to the entire northern social order. The lords speak of northern honor as if it were a tangible force, Rose muses to himself during the long hours when sleep refuses to come. Perhaps they are correct. Perhaps there are principles worth more than practical advantage. The admission represents a crack in the philosophical foundation that has guided his entire life. Rose Bolton has always believed that pragmatism trumps sentiment, that calculation defeats emotion, that the strong naturally prey upon the weak. But the aftermath of the Red Wedding suggests that moral authority can generate power that mere cunning cannot counter. Reports arrive daily of northern houses that were once neutral declaring for Robb Stark's cause. The king in the North's survival has transformed him from a failed rebel into a symbol of resistance against treachery and tyranny. His moral authority resonates beyond traditional political boundaries, inspiring loyalty that transcends regional interests. Even the Vale stirs, reports one of Bolton's few remaining agents. Lord Robin Arryn speaks of honouring the ancient friendship between Stark and Arryn. They say Littlefinger counsels patience, but the young lord grows increasingly eager to act. Each piece of intelligence confirms Bolton's worst fears. The Red Wedding was supposed to end the war by eliminating its primary protagonists. Instead, it has expanded the conflict by providing every enemy of tyranny with a common cause and a living symbol around which to rally. The final blow comes when ravens arrive bearing news that Arya Stark has been seen in the Riverlands, travelling with forces that raid Frey holdings with increasing boldness. The surviving Stark children represent living refutation of Bolton's claims to legitimacy, proof that the family he thought to destroy endures despite all his efforts. 2 wolves remain where we believed none survived, Rose observes with something approaching admiration for his enemy's resilience. They have turned our greatest victory into our most complete defeat. The Game of Thrones has revealed its cruelest irony, that the player who seemed to win everything has actually lost more than anyone else. Rose Bolton achieved his goal of eliminating rival leadership, but the cost has been his own destruction. In reaching for absolute power, he has grasped only absolute isolation. The ravens continue to bring news of approaching armies, hostile lords, and dwindling options. The price of betrayal, it seems, is higher than even the most calculating mind can bear. Justice may be slow, but it appears to be inevitable, and it comes wearing the face of those who were supposed to be dead. Chapter 12. A Different Game. 6 months after the Red Wedding that was meant to end the war, the great hall of Winterfell echoes with the sound of northern lords pledging their oaths to a king who was supposed to be dead. Robb Stark sits in his father's seat, no longer the young man who marched south with dreams of honor and justice, but a seasoned leader who has learned that survival requires both virtue and vigilance. The crown that once seemed too heavy for his head now rests there with the certainty of legitimacy earned through suffering. The North remembers, declares Lord Umber, his voice carrying the weight of a promise that has become the foundation of a new order. We remember the Red Wedding. We remember those who stood with us and those who betrayed us. And we remember that King Robb endured when lesser men would have fallen. The ceremony is unlike any coronation in the history of the Seven Kingdoms. This is not a boy king crowned through accident of birth, but a man proven through betrayal and strengthened through adversity. The lords who kneel before him do so not from obligation, but from conviction, united by shared outrage and common purpose in ways that mere tradition could never achieve. "Rise, my lords," Robb commands, his voice carrying the authority of someone who has stared death in the face and chosen to live. We gather not to celebrate victory, but to build something better from the ashes of what came before. The old Game of Thrones dies here. In its place, we forge bonds that treachery cannot break and justice that gold cannot buy. The transformation of the North from a kingdom in rebellion to a unified realm represents the most significant political development in generations. Where once great houses feuded over ancient grievances and competed for royal favor, they now stand united behind principles that transcend personal advantage. The Red Wedding accomplished what years of political maneuvering could not. It created a shared identity based on moral rather than material considerations. Far to the south, in the crumbling splendor of King's Landing, Queen Regent Cersei Lannister presides over the slow-motion collapse of her family's dynasty. The Red Keep has become a fortress under siege, not from external armies, but from the consequences of decisions made in rage rather than wisdom. Without Tywin's strategic mind to guide royal policy, every choice seems to create more enemies than allies. The faith militant grows bolder by the day, reports Grand Maester Pycelle, his voice trembling with age and fear. They speak openly of cleansing the realm of corruption and sin. They name you specifically, Your Grace, as an example of royal decadence that must be addressed. Cersei's response reveals everything that has gone wrong with Lannister rule since her father's death. Where Tywin would have crushed such movements before they gained momentum, she alternates between appeasement and threats, creating a pattern of weakness that emboldens enemies while alienating potential supporters. "Let them come," she snarls, wine staining her lips as she speaks from the Iron Throne. "I am the Queen Regent. I speak with the authority of the Crown. They dare not touch me." But the Crown's authority has eroded steadily since the news of Tywin's death spread across the realm. Lords who once trembled at Lannister displeasure now calculate whether continued loyalty serves their interests. The faith militant rises earlier than it would have in a different timeline, feeding on the chaos that weakened royal authority has allowed to flourish. In chambers throughout the Red Keep, conversations take place that would have been unthinkable during Tywin's lifetime. Lords speak openly of alternatives to Joffrey's rule, of the need for stronger leadership, of the possibility that the Lannisters have outlived their usefulness to the realm. The Game of Thrones continues, but the players have changed, and the rules no longer favor those who held power through fear alone. "The Queen grows more isolated each day," observes Lord Varys during a carefully arranged meeting with Tyrion Lannister. Her remaining allies abandon her not from treachery, but from simple self-preservation. A sinking ship attracts few passengers. Tyrion stares into his wine cup and contemplates the ruins of his family's legacy. His father's death has freed him from a lifetime of seeking impossible approval, but it has also forced him to watch the systematic destruction of everything Tywin built. The irony is sharp enough to draw blood. In seeking to eliminate his enemies, Tywin created the conditions for his own family's downfall. Perhaps that is for the best, Tyrion muses. Father built our power on gold and fear, but both have proven temporary. Maybe it is time for something different to rule in Westeros. Across the narrow sea, word of the realm's chaos has reached interested ears in Essos. Daenerys Targaryen receives reports of civil war and weakened royal authority with interest that borders on anticipation. The death of Tywin Lannister has eliminated the primary obstacle to Targaryen restoration, creating opportunities that careful planning might exploit. But the Westeros that awaits any would-be conqueror is fundamentally different from the one that Robert Baratheon ruled or that Tywin Lannister dominated. The Game of Thrones has evolved beyond simple competition between great houses into something more complex and potentially more dangerous. New powers rise while old ones fall, creating a landscape that defies traditional approaches to conquest or control. In the north, Robb Stark consolidates his hold on power through methods that would have seemed impossible before the Red Wedding. Justice for the common people, protection for the weak, and consistent adherence to moral principles create loyalty that gold cannot buy and fear cannot compel. The surviving members of House Bolton and House Frey have learned that some violations of social order carry consequences that endure beyond immediate political calculations. The Lords of the Realm speak of the Northern Kingdom as if it were a different country, reports Sir Brynden Tully during one of the councils that plan the future. They say honor is more valuable than gold north of the neck, that word-breaking carries a price higher than any man can pay. The reputation serves as both shield and sword in the new political landscape. Houses that might have challenged Stark authority through traditional means hesitate to risk being branded as oath-breakers in a realm where such accusations carry deadly weight. The moral authority that Robb commands extends beyond his immediate territory, influencing political calculations across the continent. Meanwhile, the vacuum left by declining Lannister power attracts new players who understand that the old rules no longer apply. The Faith Militant represents just one of several forces that seek to reshape the realm according to their own vision. Merchants gain influence as royal finances collapse. Common people find their voices heard for the first time in generations as traditional hierarchies weaken. The game itself has changed, observes Littlefinger during a conversation with his own agents. The pieces remain the same, but the board has been redrawn. Those who master the new rules will inherit the kingdom, while those who cling to old methods will find themselves swept aside. The observation proves prophetic as events unfold across the realm. Houses that adapt to the new reality of moral authority and popular support thrive, while those that rely on traditional approaches of gold and intimidation find their influence waning. The death of one man has unleashed forces that reshape the very nature of political power in Westeros. As winter approaches and ravens carry word of the transformations spreading across the realm, it becomes clear that the War of the Five Kings has ended, not with traditional victory, but with the birth of something entirely new. The old Game of Thrones, built on the assumption that might makes right and gold buys loyalty, has given way to a competition where moral authority and genuine service to the people matter as much as armies and treasuries. Robb Stark, standing in the Godswood of Winterfell where his father once prayed, understands that he has become part of something larger than personal ambition or family honor. The Red Wedding that was meant to destroy him has instead transformed him into a symbol of resistance against tyranny and corruption. The game continues, but it plays by rules that favor those who understand that true strength comes from the willing loyalty of free people rather than the frightened obedience of subjects. In the end, Tywin Lannister's death accomplished what his life never could. It created a realm where honor matters more than gold, where justice counts for more than fear, and where the Game of Thrones must be played with clean hands rather than bloody ones. The lions may have lost their pride, but from their downfall, something better has emerged to take their place. The North remembers, and in remembering, it has changed the fate of kingdoms.